you said you had conversations with neo-Nazis or people from the KKK. I'm a bit interested how you felt or what was the outcome of these conversations, because if you already have this experience, I mean, what was your experience being in that, and what was the impact that that had? Because you said also one thing just now. You said if you have these kind of conversations, you need to have the appropriate training. Maybe you can speak a little bit for all of us that are listening now that are in more, let's say, dense or difficult conversations. What's the training we need, or what are the skills we have to be in these conversations, maybe in a more effective way?
Well, you have to have different techniques for different people in relationship to you. So a conversation you have with a family member or a loved one that's contentious is going to be handled differently than if it's a stranger in a clan group. So you're certainly not going to use the same techniques, but you're going to use the same philosophical orientation. And that is they're members of the human family, and you've got to respect their human rights, even if they're violating yours. I think that calling it is going to be as important to the human rights movement in the 21st century as nonviolence was to the civil rights movement in the 20th. A statement of how we value the work, how we value our opponents, and how we value our own integrity. So that's very important. Now, generally speaking, by the time someone defects from the white supremacist movement and calls on a person like me or my organization for help, they've already had their own personal epiphany because they've stayed in the movement if they hadn't had a change of heart. So the question becomes, how believable are them? Are they, what are we going to do to help them? Do we want to help them? And I have to honestly say, when I first had to deal with defectors, I didn't give a damn about what happened to them. I was like, okay, you joined a hate group and you got burned by it. So what?
Hmm.
I mean, it's very safe for a Black woman to say she hates the Ku Klux Klan. No one's going to criticize me for that, right? Except the
Hmm.
Klan,
Hmm.
right? But once I got to know them, I learned that my opinions of them were always informed by my own fears and unhealed trauma. So I wasn't able to see them as the hurt human beings that they actually were. And fortunately, I had mentors like Reverend C.T. Vivian, who was my boss. He'd been an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King, who really told me, he said, Loretta, if you ask people to give up hate, then you have to be there for them when they do.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
when he told me that, I was angry because I couldn't curse out a preacher. I mean, I couldn't say to him what I actually thought. And so I walked away from that conversation so frustrated. And yet his words moved me in a way. And once I started talking to these ex-Klansmen, ex-neo-Nazis, ex-whatever, I started to see that the motion, that what motivated them wasn't hate. For the first part, when it started out, it was rejection, loneliness, getting bullied themselves, feeling like no one took their pain and suffering seriously. There were a lot of emotions there, but hate was something they had to learn to embrace. It didn't start out as hate. And so once I started understanding that about them, I began to see how people who are alienated from their families and from society can easily be sucked into these alternative universes and do a lot of damage. But that's because they're damaged people to begin with. And so we have to take their suffering as seriously as we take our own. But that's what I'm talking about, learning that skill set. If you're not at peace with your own trauma and your own pain, then you're not going to be able to offer anything to someone who's still dealing with their trauma and pain.
That's a very powerful. You said so many powerful things that touch me deeply, like just in this last answer. Like when I want to highlight just the last part that you say, if you're not in peace with your own trauma, you cannot offer that to somebody else who is in pain. So I think that's a very powerful sentence. I also heard you say that once that sentence also touched me. Once somebody gives up hate, you need to be there for them. It's a very powerful sentence. I like this sentence. It touched me deeply.
I just wish it weren't true because I took a lot of fuel from hating people who hurt people. It was a very motivating thing. And once I had to give up hate, I had to find another motivation for continuing to do the work. And it was not easy, but I began to appreciate the power of love, the power of hope, the power of community in a way that I had not appreciated.